Well, Donny Most, it is always a treat to see you. And when last we spoke, you were living in Los Angeles. Now we're zooming into your brand new home in Colorado.
Yes, indeed. In near Boulder, Colorado, about 15 minutes above that. And it's a whole new chapter for Morgan, my wife, and I. It's a big move, but it's beautiful out here. And we mainly came here because our youngest daughter been living here for a while. She got married a year and a half ago, and we weren't seeing her enough. We knew she was expecting, and Morgan and I were talking and said, we need to move, we need to be closer. And it was a big step, but we made the move. And then my daughter had a beautiful girl three and a half weeks ago. So we're grandparents now for the first time, and that's darn exciting.
Oh, Donny, that really is just the best news. So a whole new life.
Yeah.
And there's also some more exciting news, because for those of your fans who just love your music, me included, as I say, exciting news, but I like to keep people on tenterhooks. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you know what? Okay. You've been in this business they call show for over 50 years. Your first kind of professional gig was doing an ad for rice checks, and you were a teenager. Is that right?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, that was my first real, a Screen Actors Guild job where I got paid. It was a commercial, a national commercial. Yeah, it was rice checks. I was excited about that. But yes, that was probably about 1969 when I did that, I think. Wow.
How old would you have been, Donny?
I was 16 when I got that commercial.
Wow.
Yeah. Before that, I actually was working professionally, but more as a singer. I started out really pursuing singing over acting, although I was interested in it. I was going to schools when I started. I was 13, and they taught singing. I had to take tap dancing, which I didn't really care about, but they made me do that, and it was kind of fun. But acting, and through that, I was 13, and then a year and a half later, I got picked from that school to be part of a nightclub review comprised of 7 or 8 of us, all teenagers from the ages of 14 to 16. I was 14 when it started, and we performed in the nightclubs, believe it or not, at that age, up in the New York resort area called the Catskill Mountains. It was pretty famous. I kind of put it aside after that year. I became a real fan. I was watching all the great movies that were being made in the late 60s. It was a bit of a renaissance period here, where there was a more independent style of filmmaking that was going on, with films like Midnight Cowboy and The Graduate, and some of the Paul Newman movies, Cool Hand Luke, and there was and then I became a huge fan of Nicholson when I saw 5 Easy Pieces. So that really, I became laser focused on acting, and I knew the music would come back. I'd bring it back at some point, but I was concentrating. Then I shifted, and I was able to get it. I went to a much more sort of advanced dramatic workshop in Manhattan, and I was introduced to a manager, and that led to me meeting agents and going on auditions and a lot of commercials. That in New York, that's where most of them were being done then.
Now, Donny, tell me if this is true. I read somewhere that you were about 9 and you saw the story about the life and times of Al Jolson. And that for you was apparently a light bulb moment where you went, bingo, yep, want to be in showbiz, would love to be an actor, maybe a singer, perhaps a dancer.
That is absolutely correct. There was something in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, and on Channel 9, I remember, it was one of the local channels. They had something called $1 Million Movie. And they would pick a movie to show all week long, and they would show it twice every night, and 4 times on Saturday and 4 times on Sunday. I was taken by Jolson's talent, and it was Larry Parks playing Jolson, but it was Jolson's voice when all the music, when the songs were being done. And I was just taken by it and the story, and it was a really good movie. And then I wound up watching it that week probably 12 times, and then I got his albums, and then it introduced me to that genre of music, that style, the great songs from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the Great American Songbook, and with a jazz kind of approach. And I listened to the radio at night. There were stations that played that genre of music. So then I'm hearing, Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald and Tony Bennett and on. Some of the big band singers too, like Joe Williams with the Count Basie band, and I really got an education and loved that music. Just it felt like it was in my blood.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned, of course, that you were born and raised in New York. You attended a school that had some pretty special superstar alumni. There was Barbra Streisand, there was Mae West, apparently, there was Barbara Stanwyck, there was Neil Diamond. But there's a fascinating story that's gone around, and you might be able to straighten this out, Donny, that Barbra Streisand was apparently kicked out of the chorus because her voice was just so fabulous, and it wasn't meshing with all of those voices that maybe weren't quite so Streisand fabulous.
That is exactly the story that I heard when I was going to Erasmus Hall High School in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn. But what we heard is that it was just so powerful, and the type of voice she had, it wouldn't blend. So she got kicked out of the chorus. That's exactly the story, which is pretty funny story.
I got to say, it is one heck of a story. Now, when you moved to Hollywood, I understand one of your first jobs on television there was in that very popular hit TV series of the time, Emergency, with you playing a car crash victim.
Yeah, that was my second one. I went out to LA for the summer after my junior year in college. I was doing a lot of commercials in New York, but I knew LA was where all the TV shows were being shot and most of the films back then. So I wanted to pursue that. So I went out for the summer to get my feet wet and see if I could network and make some contacts so that when I graduated, I could come back out there and hit the ground running. And but what happened was I auditioned. I was able to get an agent pretty quickly from the stuff I had done in New York. And I landed, my first one was a guest starring role on a show called Room 222. It was all about high school and the kids in it, and it was kind of a comedy. So that was the first one. But then I got Emergency, where I played a car crash victim who became paralyzed from the accident. So it was a pretty heavy, dramatic role in that one, which I was actually more interested in doing drama back then than comedy. And then another part I got around that time was a show called Police Story, and I played a mad bomber, a psychopathic bomber. So again, very dramatic. But then when I got Happy Days, that was the one that really took off, and I was on a regular basis. So then I became known more for comedy. But the irony is that I was never I didn't consider myself a comedian like my character thought he was like Ralph. I was never like that, but that's what excited me about acting. Yes. Playing totally different kinds of characters. And I've been doing a lot more of that lately. So I'm really grateful for being able to, I think I've gotten even busier in the last 3-4 years. I'm finally at an age range where, where I'm not competing with what I did back then when I was a teenager. And, and I could play a grandfather now, or, a dad, and all kinds of roles. I've been playing everything from a local pastor to a polygamist and everything in between.
I wanted to ask you back to Emergency, though, because you were talking about your love of the great singing stars. Well, of course, one of the stars of Emergency was the late, great Julie London.
Julie London, yeah.
Oh, and what a voice, Stormy Weather and so many beautiful things that she sang. Of course, she was married to Bobby Troop, who sang Get Your Kicks on Route 66.
66, yeah.
Yes. But do you remember working with Julie London? I mean, was that a pinch yourself moment?
I wasn't that familiar with her at that point. I knew my father had been a fan, and so I think he was more excited about the fact that I was working with her than I wasn't. I was aware of Sinatra and Sammy Davis, and I was a huge Bobby Darin fan. Saw him at the Copacabana when I was 18. Those were the people, and I just wasn't, hadn't been exposed to Julie. Although then later I found an album that was in our house, in that living room that my dad had of Julie London's. So I didn't really know too much about her. I wish I had. I'm mad at myself, or I feel bad that I didn't get a chance or seek out to have a conversation with her or something. But anyway, yeah, I wish I could go back and redo that one.
Yes. 1974, you mentioned Along Comes Happy Days. And it was a role, when you think about it, Donny, obviously that would change your life. You became known all around the world, and the show is still, gosh, all these decades on, so loved. But I mean, is it true that you and Anson Williams, who of course is one of your best friends in the whole wide world, but you actually went for the same role, and that was of Potsie, who was Richie Cunningham's best friend, but I think it was because of hair color, that his hair was dark and yours was kind of ginger, that he got that role initially.
That's one of the reasons. I'm sure. From what I heard, you see, Ron and Anson had done a pilot of Happy Days about a year and a half earlier, and it didn't sell. It didn't go. The only other, Marion Ross was in that one and played the mom, but it was a different dad, a different Joni, and there was no Fonzie, and there was no Ralph. It didn't sell. But then, a year and a half later, Grease becomes a big hit on Broadway, show that took place in the 50s, obviously. And then American Graffiti comes out, I think, in that summer of 73. And all of a sudden, the 50s were kind of hot. And from what I heard, the ABC executives were like, well, wait a minute, didn't we had a show about the 50s, and let's go back and revisit that. And they talked to Garry Marshall, the creator and exec producer, and said, let's do a new pilot, because they wanted it to be, the original pilot was a little soft, and they wanted it to be a little edgier like Graffiti was. And so but what happened was that ABC was worried that now Ron and Anson, it's like almost 2 years later, would be too old to play the high school age. And Garry was like, no, I think they still could do it. Well, network made Garry, they had to screen test Ron and Anson, even though they had done the pilot, they had to screen test against a bunch of other actors who were vying for those roles. And I was one of them, as you said, trying out for Potsie. And then what happened was, there's a lot of different reasons why they went with Anson again and Ron. But I did hear that, having me play against Ron, we both were redheads, and it seemed a little odd. So that might have been a factor. But then the network executives told my agent that they loved my screen test so much that they wanted to create a regular role for me. So that's how and there was a small part in the pilot script for a guy named Ralph, who was into cars, and they didn't tell me much more than that. He's a bit of a jock and he's into cars. So I did the pilot. I had like 2 scenes in there, but then the show got picked up, because you don't know whether it's going to make it to the air when you do a pilot, but it did get picked up. And then my part, evolved and kept growing, and I got to be more and more of an integral part, and not just sort of on the periphery.
Oh, yes, of course, Ralph Malph, one of the iconic characters. But is this true? You initially turned down that role because you had your heart set on a movie, and that's where you really wanted to be at that point in your life?
Very good. And boy, you've done your homework of research. Yes, as I was alluding to earlier, I was more interested in drama, and I at the same time I was being considered for Happy Days. I had auditioned for a TV movie, and it took place during World War II, and it was written by the guy. His name was Herman Raucher, who had written the movie The Summer of '42. I don't know if you remember that.
I do
Great
indeed,
movie.
yes.
So I was very interested because it was a 2-hour movie, and it was period at World War II, and really well written. So they told me I had a really good chance of getting the part, but they wouldn't have an answer for about a week, because I would be the nephew of the actor Jack Warden, who I was a fan of, and so I was very excited about that. And they thought that I looked like a young Jack Warden, and it was a perfect mix. So they were saying, you got a really good chance. So when my agent told me on a Friday night that you didn't get the part of Potsie, but here's what they're offering you, 7 out of 13 episodes, you're guaranteed, and it's going to be a different role. It's not like one of the main roles. But I said, yeah, but what about the World War II movie? And they said, well, you have a good chance, but we don't know. So so I talked to my agent, and we both decided, let's pass on Happy Days and hope that I get the film. So that's what I did. We turned it down. And then, as fate would have it, my agent happened to play basketball every Saturday or Sunday at Garry Marshall's house. So my agent turns out he's playing ball, and then Garry comes over to him and says, "Hey, what's with your boy turning us down?" He said, "Come over here, let's talk." So my agent called me. He said, Garry said he thinks this is going to go as a mid-season replacement, and he upped the offer. Instead of 7 out of 13, they'll give you 10 out of 13, and instead of, I think it was $750 an episode, they'll give you $1,000 an episode. So he said, I think the other one we don't know, and this is a bird in hand kind of thing. It was a tough decision, but I said, okay, let's do it. And then I decided to take the part, which, when I go back and think how close I was to not taking it,
Yeah, I know. And something, out of Happy Days, you made a lifelong friend, and that is Anson Williams, who wound up playing Potsie, of course. 50 years on, you still are great, great chums. In fact, I know back in May, you were best man at his wedding to Sharon Mahari. Is that right?
Mahari. Yes, I was best man. And it was such a great wedding, and I was so honored to be his best man. And it was crazy because we were moving, and we pushed our move back a little so that I could be there at the wedding, but we literally had to be out of the house that we were in. We were sending it all by stuff by truck, and we were going to drive, Morgan and I, for 3 days. So we had our car packed to the gills to move, and we went to Anson's house and stayed the weekend, and I was the best man at the wedding, and then Sunday morning we got in the car and started our journey to Colorado.
Oh, wow. And the story of Anson and Sharon too is quite wonderful, because she is now his third wife, but they'd met years before when she was a realtor and sold him a house. And it's funny how then years later, the sparks of love can kind of happen, and he was off his second marriage. And it's a beautiful evolution, isn't it? A gorgeous love story.
Yes, it is. And as Anson likes to say, it's never too late to get it right, is how he said.
Now, let's talk about some of your other Happy Days co-stars, because I know you're close to most of them. Henry Winkler, of course, the Fonz, an icon. What was Henry like to work with from your point of view?
Oh, Henry was awesome. I I was so drawn right from the beginning. He was a New Yorker also, and I was very taken. At the beginning, I think he was like staying in character, so he was a little standoffish. He was a little bit, being real cool and really staying in it. So, but then I'd watch him work in a scene that I wasn't in, but I would stay even when I was done for the day. I wanted to watch everybody, Tom Bosley and Ron, and then I watched Henry work, and I knew from the beginning that he was doing something really special, and that he was great. I knew right from the get-go that he was just great, and then working with him, and then as we got to know each other more and more, then he opened up, and we became very close, and to watch the evolution of that character was something. It was because in the beginning he would come on for a scene and didn't have a lot of dialogue. He was doing everything with body language and a gesture and a look and a few lines, but yet people were loving what he was putting across, what he was getting across. And then to watch his popularity, just he became the hottest thing on television after a while. So it was quite an experience to be part of that and watch it develop.
Oh, I can imagine, because that was not originally where the show's focus was to be. And I remember that Ron Howard and his brother Clint, fabulous actor as well, they wrote a joint memoir, and Ron was very candid about feeling a little threatened by the Fonzie's enormous popularity that just kind of mushroomed out of nowhere. And Ron revealed in his memoir that they were looking to rename it Fonzie's Happy Days. And Ron wrote that he was so nervous by all of this because he was the star as Richie. That was how it was meant to be, that he got eczema and started losing his hair. But then, you kind of just figured that who cares, so long as the show is a great hit and people love it. And then he reconciled that and all was kind of cool and normal again.
I think that was the network's idea of wanting to do that. And when Garry heard that and he saw that I think Ron had a talk with Garry, and then Garry said, absolutely not. We're not going to change the name. And he stood up, and they didn't change it. And there was never any friction between Ron and Henry over this. Ron just felt like, on principle, this is what he signed up for, and it was supposed to be this. So there was never any controversy or anything like that going on. It was all done very, in a very nice and friendly manner and a respectful manner. And then Henry and Ron worked fabulously together before and after.
It was a great chemistry. I think that's the thing, Donny, about Happy Days, just this incredible chemistry. And Ron Howard, you said something really beautiful, that he was such a great role model because he'd been a star since he was like 5, and yet he remained so incredibly grounded and kind and considerate to everybody else.
Absolutely. He said he was a great role model, set a tone for us. Because, here we are, a bunch of, newcomers, so to speak. And he's been in the business since he was 3.5 and a star. And he was, grounded and very salt of the earth and never full of himself and never put on airs or anything. And a lot of that had to do, I think he credits his parents with that. So it kind of kept us in check from getting a little crazy or getting full of ourselves and believing the hype and getting caught up in stuff that maybe we shouldn't get caught up in. So he set that tone, as did Jerry Paris, our director, who had done most of the Dick Van Dyke Show. And he was a great sort of mentor for us and kept us grounded, and Garry Marshall as well. So we were very lucky to be working with Ron in front of the camera and these wonderful, talented and great human beings behind the camera.
Oh, of course. And Ron Howard has gone on to become one of the hottest directors in Hollywood. And I love the fact that he returns your calls to Donny. And I love the fact that he cast you in a movie called Ed TV. And that was back, I think, in about 1999 with Ellen DeGeneres and Matthew McConaughey, as I recall it.
And Woody Harrelson. Yeah, they play brothers, Matthew and Woody. Yeah, I was so happy that he called me to, because we had talked about working together once he started directing, and we had worked on an experimental film together when he wanted to prove that he could direct. And so I developed with him a story that he had in mind, and for me to play the lead. And we did improvisations to have the script written, and it was a very interesting process. And we got about halfway through, and then he got a call. He got assigned to direct his first film, a Roger Corman film. So I knew, I'd worked with him. I knew what his aspirations were, and worked very closely with him doing that project. I knew he'd be successful. I don't know if I could have predicted that he'd be one of the hottest directors in Hollywood, but I'm not surprised. So then when he called, and I had a chance to work with him now in this arena of a big studio film and with big stars, I got a huge kick out of that. And I was very grateful that he put me in that. And I'm hoping I get another phone call soon to be in another one with him.
I can hear the phone ringing, Donny. I'm sure I can hear it from here. It's Ron Howard. Look, the wonderful Marion Ross. I read somewhere you consider to be sort of your acting mentor because she took you under her wing. How gorgeous is Marion?
Oh, Marion's gorgeous, and just so her spirit is unmatched, and a wonderful heart, and warmth, just incredible. I've been meaning. I'm glad you brought it up because I've been meaning to call her and check in with her, see how she's doing, especially now that we're in a different state. Before we could visit, I'd go over and visit once in a while. We were not that far from each other. Yeah. So, she was amazing.
She makes great brownies too, I got to tell you, Donny. Great brownies.
Oh, I don't know if I ever had her brownies. I have to make sure that I partake in that and sample them.
Yes, maybe it was because I'd flown all the way in from Australia and we played some fabulous game out in her back garden and so forth. A beautiful woman, but I remember her at the time saying that you were, and I shouldn't say this, but she saw you as one of her favorite people in the world.
Oh, wow. That's so amazing to hear. Oh, boy. Well, I felt the same about her, and that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing.
Tom Bosley, what are your memories of Tom? Because he's sadly gone now.
I know, that was so sad when we lost Tom. Tom was great. He was always great. He was, a little bit of like the dad to us. He would give us all the four guys advice when we, at different milestones, because he had been doing it for a pretty long time. Had been on Broadway, won the Tony for Fiorello and lots of movies. Like when we were all at the point we were starting to think about buying our first house, he would give us advice about all the different, with teaching us about the mortgages and the financing and this and that. So he was kind of like a little bit of a father figure to us. And I loved watching him work also. He was such a pro. He was so, he was so polished and so easygoing. It was just a joy to work with.
Erin Moran, of course, she was Joni, just such an incredible light on screen and a really great character. But I mean, her life after the show just seemed to be one real rough, hard time after the next. She struggled with money, endured no end of bad luck and bad health. What was she like to work with?
Oh, she was a joy as well. I mean, just like you said, she had such a light that came from her. She was funny and she was so dear. And she was 13 years old when we started the show, and I couldn't believe how good she was at that age. She was like right from the get-go. She was on it. She was totally on it, and as she grew into the later teen years, she kept developing and got even better. And she always laughing just fabulous to be around. I was not there after the 7th season. I decided my contract was up, and I decided not to return. It was a tough decision, but Ron made the same move that year, and the show ran for 4 more years. So then, when she started, I heard there were some issues maybe with drinking or this or that. I wasn't around, so I didn't really know. But then I'd see her afterwards at events, at some personal appearances, and it was always great to be with her and see her. And I knew that she was going through some things, but she seemed to be doing, the last time I'd seen her, she was doing really well. I thought she was, kind of getting back to her old self and doing very well. But unfortunately, then she became ill. She developed a lung cancer, and so sad that she was way too young.
Only in her 50s, I think, Donny. And it was, throat cancer that she died of in 2017.
Oh, throat. That's
right.
It was
story,
throat
she
cancer.
probably had lung cancer as well. But I mean, her story getting there is just so heartbreaking, from terrible bouts of depression that she was very honest about. She couldn't get acting work, and she kind of lost her home and then moved into a trailer park in Indiana, I think. And just everything seemed to work against her. But you look at her and she still has so many fans, and people think, sometimes, the trajectory that life can take you on can just be really unfair and quite cruel.
Like you said, it just seemed she was getting a couple of one stroke of bad luck after another. And the business is very rough, and especially when you start young. I'm thankful that it didn't happen for me until I was 20. I had been through 3 years of college. You're a young adult already. You've sort of know who you are, established your identity to a greater degree than when she was 13 when she started, and that's rough. It's a tough arena to be in, and that's why it's so hard for child actors. So yeah, my heart always went out to her, and but she's I'm sure enjoying hearing our conversation now and smiling right now.
Yeah, I agree. Robin Williams, of course, famously guest starred on Happy Days and then wound up with his own TV series spin-off, Mork and Mindy. What were your observations of Robin Williams? Was he just the extraordinary comedy genius that we've all heard of?
Yes, very much so. I remember vividly getting to the sound stage. It was a Thursday morning, because they had trouble casting that part, and the actor who originally was doing it quit because we thought it was a really not a good script. It was crazy with this, it turned out to be a dream, but it was like, it just seemed out of step with what we were, what we had been doing. But then I got to the soundstage on Thursday. I didn't have to get there till later, almost noon, because my scenes weren't going to be, it was camera blocking day. And so I didn't have to get there until then. And I get onto the soundstage, and they had hired Robin, like the night before when they were desperate. So, and some people had seen him at the Comedy Store. I think Garry Marshall's sister had seen him and said, "Oh, I know the guy who could be perfect." So I get on the set, and I hear everybody going, "Wait till you see this guy. He's amazing. Wait till you see him." Everybody was like flipping out. So there was this buzz on the set. And then I get over, and they're rehearsing a scene, and I'm watching him. And it's like, this guy, he's playing a guy from another planet. And it seemed like he was from another planet. That's what it seemed like. It was like, where did this guy come from? He was improvising and coming up with things that weren't in the script, that maybe he pulled some stuff from his act and his own genius, mind that would work in a way that was different than most people. The speed in which it operated was amazing. So we knew we were in awe of what he was doing with this character, and then by Friday, when we shot in front of an audience, the word had gotten around so much. All of a sudden, there were all these ABC network executives there to watch the show, and they were never there to watch art when we shot in front of an audience, but they were there that night. And then we come back after the weekend, Monday, and we find out, well, guess what? Robin now has his own show. It's like, what? Like that, you know?
I know, incredible. And then his career took off, and he was just loved the world over, and then his death. And when you heard that, Donny, when that news came through that Robin Williams had left us, what were your first thoughts?
I was kind of in shock, you know, and not, I just couldn't believe it. It was just hard for me to take it in. It didn't seem real, you know. It's like, well, no, that can't be. But then when I realized it was, you know, a lot of sadness, obviously, and I just felt, oh, what a loss. What a loss. I mean, he has so much more that he could have given us and would have given us, and a lot greatness, you know, just greatness. And it was a big loss for all of us. That's kind of the way I felt.
Yeah. What was Garry Marshall like? I mean, of course, he was the creator of Happy Days, but he was involved in so many other shows. And he just seemed, from an outsider, Donny, like one of those really always happy, upbeat, energetic people. Is that what he was like, or was there another side to Garry Marshall?
That pretty much, that's the way I, you know, observed, remember him, and the way he came across. He was, you know, he was a comic. He had a genius comedy mind as well. He would keep us in stitches when we would be. We'd have a run through of the show with all the writers there, and producers, and Garry would be there, and you know, we would then have notes afterwards, and we would address certain parts of a scene or a whole scene that where it wasn't working, and what the problems were and how it could be fixed. And inevitably, in all of those sessions, Garry would, out of nowhere, come up with an idea that we'd all go, oh my God, brilliant, what a fantastic idea. And we'd be laughing. And he was funny. Just when you talk to him, he was always funny. And I did see some moments where there were a couple of times when I saw him get very serious. But you know, that was like 5%, and 95% he was just he was always funny and positive and supportive and very supportive of all of us, and just great.
And he left us, of course, in 2016. His sister Penny Marshall, Laverne from Laverne and Shirley. I mean, that was a Happy Days spin-off, of course. And gosh, she left us 2 years later.
I know. I look back and I see, you know, Penny, and then recently Cindy Williams, which really got to me, because I had been working with Cindy a year or two before that, doing a play together, and I gotten to know her much more so than I had, and I couldn't believe it when I heard that Cindy was gone. You know, it just and from that show, Eddie Mecca also passed away, and David Lander, you know, played Squiggy, all so young and way too soon. And it's very, you know, I get really sad when I think about it, but and you have to be grateful for, you know, what we have right now. Yeah, as you mentioned, I had a birthday not too long ago, which is a bit of a milestone, and I turned 70, which I still can't believe. So, you know, I have to feel grateful that I'm still here and I'm active, and I feel like there's a lot more to do. So, you know, it puts things in perspective for you when you lose, you know, friends and coworkers like that. It's a eye opener for sure.
It's true. And, you know, Happy Days for you also must hold a special place in your heart because, well, it's where you met your wife, Morgan Hart, and you wed, I think it was 1982. So that's 42 years of wedded bliss.
Unbelievable. So that's the other thing. Like you said, I feel so grateful for Happy Days on many levels, but meeting my the love of my life and the woman I've been married to for those years. That wouldn't have happened if not for Happy Days.
No, because she had a little role on there as Angela, didn't she? Who had this passionate smooch with the Fonz, but
Right.
off camera, it was you and Morgan who kind of the sparks of love flew. How did that happen, Don?
We would rehearse the show during the week. The regular cast started on Monday and Tuesday, and then the guest stars would come in on Wednesday. So I was introduced to Morgan on that Wednesday, and I was, smitten by her beauty right away. And then we had opportunities to talk a little bit here and there, and I really enjoyed talking with her as well. And then on Thursday is camera blocking day, so we got to have more opportunities in between the rehearsal to talk a little bit, because we just seemed to get along and talk very easily. And then on Friday, which was the final, we do a dress rehearsal with some audience in the stands, and then we would break for dinner, and then after dinner we'd do the show. Well, a lot of the times we'd go to the studio commissary for dinner, but there was a really nice restaurant right outside Paramount Studios on Melrose Avenue called Nickadel's. And once in a while, some of us, we'd say, well, let's go to Nickadel's tonight, that kind of thing. So I went up to Morgan and said, instead of eating at the commissary, can I take you to dinner? We could go to Nickadel's. And she said yes. So we did, and sparks were flying, and I was really smitten by her. And then we shot the show, and then we kept, we exchanged numbers, and we started dating, on a regular basis. And 2 years later, we got married. Smoke alarm.
Well, as I say, that is one heck of a hot romance still all these years on, because you've sorted your fire alarm situation.
Yes, I put the fire out, but we'll get it going again later.
But the thing about you two, you and Morgan, is that you're genuine soulmates, aren't you?
Definitely, absolutely. That's the way we've talked about that, and it's always felt that way. And for it to last this long and us to be still as much, if or more, in love than ever, absolutely soulmates. Yes.
She is now dealing with Parkinson's disease and has been very candid about this, because she writes a blog sharing her experiences and letting others in a similar situation know that they are not alone. How is she doing, Donny?
She's doing pretty well. I mean, she's a warrior. She amazes me with the strength that she has, because it's a tough disease. She's had it for 22 years.
Wow.
But she's doing amazingly well. We've seen a lot of really good doctors, and we found a really good one down here. But it's challenging. It fluctuates. You'll have days that are really good, and then days that are tough. But there's a lot of research being done and some new things coming out, and so there's hope that we're praying, that there'll be a cure. Right now there's things that control symptoms, but they don't have a cure. But there's some things that they think they're coming up with that will slow the progression of it, which is a big deal. That could help immensely. But she's doing pretty well. And I see some real improvement, which is great.
Well, I'm sure now there are lots of people watching who are wishing you both absolutely the best. I mentioned at the beginning of our chat that you had some really exciting news, and it is with regard to some new music. But I just suddenly springing to mind, thinking of you and your wonderful performances as a singer, I shan't forget a certain episode in Chips where you played this satanic rock star that I've got to say, with all that face paint, more like war paint, it had a very spooky look to Gene Simmons from Kiss. Would you agree?
Yes, I think they definitely were influenced and inspired by Gene Simmons, his makeup and look, because that's how, when I got there and I got into makeup and I saw what they were doing, I immediately thought that too.
I got to say, you do it very well. You're one of the great swing singers, great jazz stars. But I mean, for you to be doing Rock Devil Rock is really kind of shaking things up.
Yeah, that was a little change of pace for me, a different style. But I got into it just, as doing the role, from an acting point of view, and really put myself into it. And I'm always amazed when I go around for certain, Comic-Cons and different shows, fan shows, and autographs. There's always people who come up to me and ask me about that episode and want to know about it. And Moloch was the name of my character. Yes. It seemed to have like a little bit of a cult following or something. It was really kind of surprising to me.
Now, you have a new album out right now, New York High, it's called, and New York High is also a single from that album that is charting. Tell me about that, Donny.
Yes. What happened was the producer, Tony Mantor, who's based in the Nashville area, he has relationships and contacts in the UK. And he thought it would be good to release the single of New York High over in the UK before officially releasing it here in the States. I said, okay, yeah, you know better than I do. So we did. And and there's a chart over there called the Heritage Chart. Mike Reed is the host. The song entered in 40th position. And then the next week it moved to 32. And then now just this week it's now
and Donny Most, New York High at 26.
And I didn't realize the significance of it, but I was being interviewed by somebody over in the UK, and they were like saying, how does it feel to have a hit single? And I'm like going, oh, do I have a hit single? I didn't even realize, that it's kind of a big deal to be in that position. And the thing is that people can vote. So anybody listening can vote, because each week, they come up with a new position for the charts. So if people, they can look up Heritage Chart. First of all, listen to my song and see if you think it's worthy of voting. And then, but then people can vote once a week. You just go to the Heritage Chart website, scroll down, and it says vote. And so if people like it and want to vote for me, I'm cool with that.
Of course you are. I mean, you still got it. You realize that, don't you? Naturally.
Right.
But I also wanted to say, Donny, as I understand it, it's stirring up some interest in Grammy circles as well, which is equally as exciting.
Very excited. I'm being realistic, but what happened is the album has been released here, even if the single hasn't officially been released, but the album is out. It's on iTunes and Spotify and Apple and all that. And there's the ballots came out for the Grammys, and I didn't understand how it worked. From my experience, I'm aware of when you have the 5 nominees in each category, and then they're vying to win, the Grammy. But I didn't realize that. I kind of knew it, but I never paid attention to it. Is that initially a ballot comes out with a bunch of people that are now hoping that they'll be in the final 5. So what Tony told me is that, it's really good if you could get onto the ballot. Just getting on the ballot is really good. So I said, oh, I didn't realize that. So it came out, the ballots came out, not the final ones. Again, it's the initial one, but it came out like a week ago, not even. And he called me, he said, you made it to the ballot for the best album of the year in the category of traditional pop. That's kind of, I guess, the standards and the Great American Songbook kind of music. So he was very happy about that. And so I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know the significance of that, but he was very happy about that. So so we'll see. The voting members of the Grammys are voting this week. I think it was 10 days from when we found out. And so I'm keeping good thoughts. It's a long shot to become one of the 5 nominees, but who knows? We'll see.
See this,
Keep our
Donny?
fingers crossed.
They're
Yeah.
called cross fingers, and if I could show you my toes, they'd be crossed as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Who knows,
Now, the thing is, you recently celebrated your 70th birthday, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Ron Howard's done it. Marion Ross has done it. Henry Winkler's done it. I'm wondering if Donny Most is going to do it. I'm talking about a memoir, thinking about your enormously rich showbiz life and such a beautiful love story and so many interesting journeys and having seen so much in life. I mean, my gosh, I'm even thinking now, didn't John Lennon and May Pang visit the set of Happy Days on one occasion?
Yeah, that was a crazy, unbelievable day when John showed up with Julian, unannounced. Nobody knew he was coming. Anson walked over to us, and he'd gone to get some coffee, and he said, "This guy just walked onto the soundstage and looks a lot like John Lennon." We're like laughing. Yeah, sure. John Lennon's coming to see us, right? And then like 2 minutes later, we see him walking over, and we're all like with our mouth down to the floor going, and we realized it was him. Unbelievable. And he stayed there for hours. It was, I think, he was a big fan of 50s music. And I think what happened was we'd only been on the air, I think maybe 4 or 5 episodes. So 5 episodes. But I guess Julian was a fan, and they were visiting LA, and they were at Paramount Studios. So they just came over. To this day, it seems like it was not real. Like I dreamt
real
it.
Experience. But with that, just that's one example of no doubt countless. Do you think there could be a time when you'd pen a memoir, you'd sit down and write your extraordinary journey?
I think it's possible. Some people have talked to me about it. A couple of people that worked with, other celebrities where they helped them to write a book. And I said, I'm just not, it's not time right now. It's just, I feel it's a little too soon. I guess I could, but I see it more likely a little bit down the road, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, or somewhere in between, something like that.
Well, Donny Most, I got to say, it's always a joy catching up with you. And
thanks, Greg. Great talking with you.
My best of luck with New York High and all of your other endeavors, and our great love to you and to Morgan as well. And thank you for your generosity with your time. Look at it. We've been chatting now for over an hour. Once I get started, I can't stop, but that's how it is.
So I'm happy to do it, and I enjoyed it very much. And good seeing you again, Kelley. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Don. See you soon.
We'll do it again somewhere, I'm sure.